I come from a family of doctors, and so fashion while growing up was this, what is that? You want to make clothes? You want to stitch? What do you do exactly? So a lot of my parents' friends would say, oh, what do you want to do? You want to become an engineer or doctor? And they would say fashion design, and their face would just look at you like, why? What is wrong with you? So by some stroke of luck, I managed to wing it through BCom and then got into NID, which by itself seemed like a miracle because there were 9 seats. And my dad's like, are you sure you really want to do this? Luck was there and I got through. I managed to sort of, like Patu said, I really felt like I fit in for the first time in my life. It was something which I enjoyed. People, even sometimes I wonder, like at a serious design seminar, what am I doing as a fashion designer? We are frivolous, we are fickle. I mean, we are officially allowed to change our opinion twice a year, spring, summer, autumn, winter. So how should my opinion really matter? But at the end of the day, it is, something which has to do with emotion, it has to do with people, it has to do about changing things and changing lives. For me, there are only two things that I enjoy in what I do. A is the process of innovation, where I want to do something which has not been done before, which I haven't seen before. I mean, God knows there is like a contagion, like epidemic of fashion designers in this country right now, where every 2 months there's something popping up on the Purnia's pop-up shop, where everybody with access to 2 tailors is a designer. And there are no real parameters of what is good design, what is bad design, what is really design, or is it just a product you're making and selling. It's hard in that scenario. So one, like, I'm just going to be a little garbled, but first thing, like I said, is the innovation part of it. And second is that I genuinely enjoy making people look good. I enjoy making women look beautiful. I enjoy making them feel confident. I enjoy making them feel like better versions of themselves. Of course, there are some certain times when somebody comes to you who's in their 50s and says, I want to look like Katrina Kaif in Doom 3. I mean, honey, you need a cosmetic surgeon, not me. But that apart, within the limited parameters of what we do, I try and tell stories. I was one of those crazy kids, who grew up reading the Reader's Digest and National Geographic sitting in one corner in my house. So a lot of my references still remain nature-inspired. What I'd like to briefly take you through, if you get bored, whistle or clap or whatever, that I get a little hint like he's doing for the timings. But is to sort of look at the world around me, look at what interests me, and try and interpret that in a format which is exciting in terms of surfaces, exciting in terms of textile, and also exciting in terms of what it does on the body. This is a shoot we did years ago with, in fact, Vishesh, who's from NID, and the collection was inspired by the Silk Route. I'll just take you through the brief beginnings of where I started from. So that was a younger, thinner me, quite 6, 7 years ago. So fashion, evidently, some people, like I said, eat. But that's at my Gen Next stall. And I remember, coming from NIT, and although I had a scholarship to study at NSAD in Paris and had a little bit of exposure of, working with Louis Vuitton and all those fancy names, still nothing really prepares you for the ocean that fashion is, where you just jump in and, suddenly it's not about you anymore, it's just what product you put out there. And the reasons why people buy a product are not entirely something that they necessarily understand themselves. I was clear I wanted to do something which was different from what Indian designers at that point were commonly doing, or internationally designers were doing, which was also recycling the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and one season bell bottoms would be in, and exactly 3.5 weeks later, the 60s shift skirt would be in. So for an industry where trends are so ephemeral, but increasingly the industry is also governed by them. I dare say this, but more than now, because there are a lot of international brands sort of who are selling in the country. A lot of the publications and the Indian industry on that sense rides on the advertising money that the big brands bring. So if they say the 70s are in, you say the 70s are in. If they say the 50s are in and the nipped waist is back, you say, so there is no real format in which what one does. And what I try and do, hopefully, is to create things which have some emotion, some story to them, a clear inspiration. So where it's, a journey inspired by, say, Africa, or something inspired by the Maori tribe. You want to tell those stories through the medium of clothes and have pieces which hopefully are timeless and sort of carry on beyond when, say, the next stylist decides that a certain cut is in, or Rihanna decides that coral is the new black. So this is from my first collection, which has a lot of texture, a lot of cut work. Everything was hand done. So the techniques, like this dress would take something like maybe about 2 weeks odd for a tailor to stitch because everything is sort of texturized on the machine. But it is not something which anybody in the world was doing, and still it's like my wife wears it now after 7 years, and still we take orders on it. So you want something which has got a little lasting value from just the superfluous. A lot of graphic detail. I'm also inspired hugely by travel. So you'll see a lot of sort of, basically, I mean, once you live in Bombay long enough, at any given opportunity, you want to escape and go anywhere else. So I think that is a little bit of an element there. So these are some of the, color is also an important part of what I do because I think that really brings joy. I mean, how depressed can you be wearing a pink dress? So these are little of the earlier collection. This one was called Zoom In, Zoom Out, and it was inspired by aerial photography and, so really zoomed out visions of the earth and then very, very zoomed in where it was like, say, textures of skin and stuff like that. This was again done with cut work. And one of my favorite collections, which was Toxin. It was inspired by, like I said, the National Geographic. So poison arrow frogs and, lionfish and box jellyfishes and stuff like that. So we did a lot of those, the colors that you see, the patterns that you see, and I'm seeing one of the mosaic right here. But it's something which was done with, again, with like this jacket was done with applique. There is shibori in the skirt, or there is layering where there is color interaction. The last dress also has shibori with each sort of strip of fabric individually cut, dyed, and then re-sewn together. But it is still, I would say, craft, but done in an urban setting. Because, I mean, all of the people are those who have learned through the years, from when they were maybe 12 years old, although it's not allowed. And from the villages have come to Bombay, they're doing what they do and practicing, but it still can be sold anywhere in the world. This is from Toxin again. This is, of course, it wouldn't be anything post-lunch, a little short of glamour wouldn't hurt. And increasingly more than ever now, I think, it's a sad situation, or one adapts with the times, is where somebody would buy a dress because ABC or XYZ has worn it, rather than because it's a nice dress or because it works on them. But I feel more than ever, I went through a time when, you say, do I really want to sell like this? Do I care whether, Aishwarya wears my dress or whatever? But the point is, I think when you're an entrepreneur and you have something to say, any medium that you have which you can live with, which carries the message of what you do, is a valid medium. Because if your work is amazing and or you believe it's amazing and it's sitting in the studio in locked cupboards, it makes no sense. Either it has to be seen or it has to be worn. This is one inspired by the Fibonacci series and night lights and called abstraction. This was called the magpie, which was again inspired by travel and magpies which pick up shiny objects, as you all know. So all the techniques that I use are sort of homegrown. The textiles are homegrown. But the styling and the look of the collection is what sort of works for a larger audience, I believe. This was called Golden Hour, inspired by the sky during sunrise and sunset. There's one called Lightness of Being, which I think, again, from the whole sort of notion of travel, escape, for me, I think, and that's something which, while at NID, and Aditi Ranjan was the one who once told me, saying, you work best when it's like meditation, when you sort of shut your eyes and it comes to you rather than you try and seek what next. This, of course, goes in direct conflict with what happens in the fashion industry, where we're all chasing the newer, shinier, brighter, the future, really. This is Caravan, inspired by the Silk Route. So you have sort of the jalis from Morocco, you have tiles from Turkey, you have dome designs from across the Islamic world. The colors are inspired by the colors of spices and carpets. And this is a shoot that we did again for that, like I mentioned. I'm just going to take these three collections, a little bit of detail. Like for me, I mean, people wonder, everybody has their own inspiration point. For somebody, is their mother's wardrobe which inspired me. Hell, my mother was a doctor. I mean, all they could afford then was 20 rupee saris, bought off some small shop. Or it could be Maharani Gayatri Devi, or it could be whatever that sort of, I call it sort of, sets up a light bulb inside you, where you just feel happy looking at it. For me, it's nature. And for me, there's also a challenge where you try and do stuff which reinterprets something, or there's a little bit of an illusionary quality to it. So Fossil was inspired, of course, by fossils. And the challenge for me really was to try and take fabrics such as chiffon, georgette, organza, which are absolutely featherweight, and try and sort of give them a look of striations in rock, or whether it was agate, or bring those patterns through embroidery. So the techniques are very, the technique could be age-old, its interpretation is modern. You have the ginkgo leaves done as applique. You have, the gravel-like quality of rocks done in beading. The pink and the grey dress you see second from the left is also, again, done with tie-dye. and then pleating. So there are all of these techniques which also have to be relevant when a person wears them. I mean, many a times in fashion one sees either there are clothes, like a lot of time people say, ye kaun pehnega? Because what you show on the runway, I mean, it has to tell a story and there has to be poetry, but it cannot be divorced from life. Your clothes only, like when somebody makes a house, I mean, if you can't enter, or if it's a buffet, which is all made of wax, I mean, it's beautiful to look at, but I can't eat a damn thing. So this is from the fossil collection itself. Now this was an embroidery which I had seen in the vault of the Victor and Albert Museum, and it's from the Maharaja of Oudh's emblem, the insignia. And this is the only example I've seen of Zardozi, for those who are from textiles background perhaps, which is encased with sequins inside. So we've done those for an evening gown, and we sold tons of them to the Middle East, so more power to them. This is freed up into a dragonfly embroidered jacket. What carries the message forward, like I said. This jacket again has, it almost looks like rocks when it sort of is exhibited in a gallery or up close, but it weighs maybe 85 grams. So it's a really light piece of textile with the thing. This remains one of my favorite collections, and I lived in New Zealand for 2 years before my graduation. And the Maori tribe is the culture and this juxtaposition of femininity with strength was what was very, very exciting for me. I mean, one side you have this whole fair and lovely, yardly, dream flower, like, one wisp and the girl would sort of fall down and keel over. And then you have women who do the haka, or, sort of also are nurturers, but also are warriors when required. So it's a fearsome sight, and there's something about these primitive, as one calls them, cultures, where in a world where everything is increasingly globalized, you really want to look at people, who have hung on to that tradition, but without sort of molesting it or being disrespectful to the culture, reinterpret for a larger audience. I mean, you couldn't wear a Maori costume and go on to a party anywhere unless it was costume, which would be still derogatory. So what I've tried to do is, taking inspiration from the different aspects of culture, the silver fern, the Maori facial tattoos, and their pew-pew flax skirts. Try and reinterpret them in different fabrics and techniques. So you have the tattoos done as extensive embroidery and with laser cut work on the sleeves. So again, what is enjoyable for me is this mix of hand and technology. So you have something which, somebody only in India can do at that price and with that quality sometimes. And then you have something which is as modern as it gets, which is laser cut leather. This again it was worn to give the notion of a tattoo on skin. So this was the collection where we had these laser cut chin pieces done. In a design conference, I agree, you have to suspend logic a bit to view fashion, but that's how it is. I mean, what logic can there be for a pair of $3,000 shoes which you'll wear twice? Or I know women who buy $3,000 shoes and keep them in their cupboard just to look at because they don't want to spoil them. So, you have to suspend form and function and just look at it from an emotional point of view. So this was the collection. There's laser cutting, embroidery, and fringing, of course. I just want to take you through the story of this one dress. So something like this, which apparently is, sort of optically simple to look at, takes close to about 875 hours of embroidery and another maybe 80 hours of tailoring, finishing, all of those other processes. So it's going through the various stages as it goes through. And then it finds its relevance in terms of creating a cultural conversation through Kalki, who was shot for Verve for this. And then they had collaborated later with two artists, Dhruvi Acharya and Brinda Miller, to tell those stories in different ways. It also finds its resonance on the red carpet where, it becomes a part with the fringes swaying. It's almost like performance art. This is a retail version of it. So just to sort of give you a hint of how we take that inspiration and make it into something what most women want to wear. This is the Maori cape which we've done in fringing in silk, which was worn for a shoot. These are the original are in flax, and we've done them in woolen felt, which has been hand cut, combined with embroidery on a very, very thin net base to sort of give it that swinging movement, yet make it a garment which is high fashion. This is what Brinda Miller created out of the garment that Kalki is worn for Verve. This is the latest collection, which was again inspired by Africa. Escape, travel, those things continue to be constantly tempting for me. And Africa, again, is supposedly the birth of mankind. So, how do I tell that story in its own format in different ways? So the palette was inspired by the colors of the sand, the sun, and the sky. And the Dinka corset sort of found interpretation in beading. the Masai necklaces were done, and their checked fabrics were done. So even this garment, which is deceptively simple, has a bodice in Kanchipuram silk, the sleeves are in shirting, and then you have the beadwork done as embroidery. You have the Tuareg tribesmen and their silver jewelry, which is interpreted again with embroidery for clothes. And that would be a red carpet version and a retail version. I also recently collaborated with Bombay Dyeing. When we said the theme was connections, and as a designer, of course, one can't be a jack of all, but there are things which you want to sort of express in formats apart from what is your core strength, be it furnishing, be it God knows what else. So they have this line called the signature line, where I just collaborated and did the toxin collection, taking it forward for bed linen, where we sort of did a print version of it aimed at the under 30s as a target audience. And this was a lightness of being as a serene collection where, in our stressed out lives, when you come to the bedroom, you want it to be an ocean of serenity, where you want to sleep well. So this collection was aimed at that. I've also been doing a little bit of ad shoots and stuff like that for, doing what we do. This is, of course, a landmark moment of style, both the senior Mr. and Mrs. for a Tanishq ad. So that's what I really do. I mean, it's fashion sometimes, even I struggle with it, I'll be honest, is how do you sort of do something which makes you feel good about the field, which makes you feel like you're doing something which is carrying the conversation forward, which is doing something which says things that have not been said, gainfully employs people, yet gives not only the customers and consumers who wear it and experience it joy, but also makes you feel like you're progressing as a human being. And it's difficult to juggle all those things, and increasingly in a world and an economy where what we have is insta fashion, where young girls come to me and say, "Oh, I can't wear it again. I'm going to put it on Facebook and it's over." So, what do you say to an industry like that today, where originally, if you look at the beginnings of where the history of dressmaking began, where the Maharajas or the kings, they had maybe millions of garments that they made which were beautifully done, which sort of explored technique, which became museum pieces, to what you have now is I would say deterioration, where you have say like Primark, where you get a fully functioned fashion jacket for 15 pounds. There's evidently something wrong when a jacket is being sold on Oxford Street, which is the highest retail area in London, for 15 pounds, somebody's not getting paid. So how do you sort of go around and change this, mindset where today, of course, a Deepika Padukone can afford to wear new clothes every day because half of them are gifted, the rest are borrowed. So the problem happens when real girls come to me, who are 17 and say, "I want to look like Deepika and I can't wear this dress again." Darling, you can't get silk then. You're going to get dirty polyester. You're going to get finishing which is not nice. You're not going to get, maybe there'll be somebody in Bangladesh who's employing child labor. So how do you sort of carry forth the history of beautiful clothes, carry forth the history and the tradition of what makes Indian clothes different, and yet not be swallowed by this tsunami of global influences, where we look like anybody, how Korea dresses or how young girls anywhere dress, and where it goes from just disposable fashion to emotional, treasurable clothes. I don't know myself, but hopefully as the years go through, it's just been 7 years that I have launched my label and I'm going with this. We'll try and find some answers along the way. Thank you.